If you're trying to make money with cards and you're not getting the results you want, I'm about to show you exactly where I'd look first to figure out what's going wrong and how I'd fix it. Now, if you're new here and you're wondering why you should listen to me, fair question. My name is Ryan Seaver. I've invested in cards for 20 years. I was recently featured in Beckett Magazine, and I literally wrote the book on card investing. So let's dive in, and we'll start with the first question, which is, do you have an actual strategy? The first thing I can tell you is if you think you're accidentally going to make money in this space, you're simply not. So you really need to have a strategy, and I don't care what it is. So if you're someone who wants to negotiate a big discount and then go and flip for full price, perfect, do that. If you want to play the seasonal timing game, great, do it. If you want to grade cards, great, do it. If you want to speculate on performance, it's risky, but fine, do it. Prospecting, fine. Speculate on free agency, speculate on the playoffs, buy card lots and piece them out for profit. Guys, I don't care what it is, just pick one and do it, but you better have a strategy, because without a strategy, you're going to find yourself with random cards and zero exit plan at all, and you're just never going to win that way, at least not consistently. Now, here's a good way to confirm you actually have a strategy, and it's what I call the why win framework. So for a card you're either looking at buying or a card that's already part of your inventory, you want to be able to clearly explain why you think the card's value is going to rise and when you think it'll realistically happen. And if you can do that and you like the explanation for not one but both of those questions, that's a reasonable argument to own that card. And if you don't like the explanation for either the why or the when, there's just probably a better place for your money. Proceed accordingly. By the way, if this kind of card investing strategy is helpful, subscribe to the channel. I put out multiple videos most weeks and 100% of it is card market strategy. All right, next one, you got to ask yourself, does this play have enough upside to be worthwhile if you're right? The simpler way to say that is this worth my time? So just because you can make money on something doesn't always mean you should. So you got to consider the time invested, the money you've got to invest to make the play, the opportunity cost, like what are all those other plays out there that you could make with that same money? Every time you make an investment, you're actually making two decisions. You're choosing to invest in that specific card, but you're also choosing not to invest in all other cards that you could have spent that same money on. So let me give you a few real world examples of what I mean here, because this shows up in a bunch of different ways in the card market. So I'm actually in the middle of a quick flip challenge in my card investing community where I set out to use what I call the quick flip strategy to make $1,000 of profit in a month. And one of the things that I do for this strategy is I'm looking for deals off of eBay where I can find a card for less than market price to then flip on eBay for full market price. This strategy takes a little bit of work, but those cards are definitely out there. This is actually how I got my start many years ago, because I only started with a few $100s in this space and I had to kind of grind my way up to build my bankroll before I got to the bigger plays and the bigger cards that I deal in now. But anyway, one of the sites that I was looking at had a bunch of good cards that were a little bit under market value, so I was buying a bunch of these, and one of the cards that I picked up was this Ken Griffey Jr. Topps Turkey Red, the red border. I found this card, it was only $1.20, and I was looking at comps, and this one was worth about $3, maybe $4 on a good day. And so I ended up buying this card along with a bunch of other singles from this site. But here's the problem. Most of the cards that I bought from the site are great. They're going to be nice wins. I'm going to make some money. The problem with this one is that the shipping and the consignment fees eat into any possible margin here. So there's really no way for me to sell this, even though I got it for like 30% of market value. So a good deal is not necessarily a good opportunity. On the flip side, on that same exact site, the same day, I found a Barry Bonds 1997 Fleer Zone insert for $10. Comps on that card recently are $60, $75, and $95. So I'm happy to take that for $10 and flip it around for $75 or so. And even after fees and shipping, that's going to be a $50 net profit. Really easy money to make if you can put in a little bit of work to find those kinds of deals. But to make $50 on a card like that is far more worth my time than it is to make 11 cents on that Griffey Topps Turkey Red card. Second example for you here. So when you're grading, we gotta target higher upside cards if we want to give ourselves the best chance to make money. So what do I mean by higher upside cards? Well, for example, two cards both cost $100 raw. It's the same $80 PSA grading fee to get them graded, but card A sells for $300 as a PSA 10, card B sells for $700 as a PSA 10. One of those lets you go so much faster because you're spending the same time to find those cards, the same grading fee, the same time to get them graded, but one of them just makes you way more money. Higher upside cards build in buffer as well, so if you run into a tough grader and you end up with a lower gem rate than expected, happens to all of us from time to time, that's going to give you some buffer so that the 10s can more than cover the PSA 9s and any other non-10 grades, and you're still going to have enough money to put a nice profit in your pocket at the end of the day. Higher upside cards also give you buffer in case the market shifts while your cards are being graded. Sometimes values will compress, especially newer products where the PSA 10 pop report keeps climbing. A lot of times that puts some downward pressure on prices, and by the time your cards come back, a PSA 10 might not be looking the same way it was when you sent the card off to be graded. But when you target higher upside cards, there's still plenty of margin in those types of cards to be able to profit on your order more often than not. Guys, I've worked with hundreds of card investors, and this is one of the number one things that people get wrong. They send off cards to be graded, they put in all this work, and they get good grades even sometimes, and they just aren't making any money, and it's almost always because they're losing in the draft. Pick higher upside cards to grade, you're just going to go so much faster. And speaking of going faster, if you want the fastest way to find cards with meaningful upside, even with higher PSA grading fees, I built a software called Coin that automatically surfaces a ranked list of cards with some of the strongest all-around grading metrics on the market. It lets you do 5 hours of grading research in 5 seconds, so you can just get to eBay to start finding the clean copies of those cards rather than spending your life trying to figure out which cards do you target in the first place. Now, Coin is a paid tool, so don't bother if you're not actively grading. You're not going to get the value from it. But if you do grade cards regularly, I'll leave a link in the description where you can grab a free trial and see what you think. All right, back to the video. So example number 3 here. One of the members of my community originally came to me wanting to scale his profits. So last year he did about $120,000 of card sales, but he only made about $30,000 of profit. Now there's nothing wrong with $30,000. Like, that's great. Most people would love to have that kind of a business in cards. But when I looked at all the volume he was doing, I just didn't see any reason why he should only be making $30,000 on 120K of actual sales. And so here's what we did. We dug in, and what I found was that he was managing hundreds of low dollar listings on his eBay store. Like, I'm talking, there were hundreds of cards that were between $2 and $15 a piece. And these cards were taking like 90% of his time, but they were making him hardly any money. Meanwhile, the stuff that he was doing the other 10% of his time, they were cards that he was grading and making good money on. He was also enjoying doing the work on those cards a lot more. And so there was just like a clear and obvious mismatch there, but sometimes you just need that outside perspective to help you see it. So here's what we did. We had him outsource all of those cards and sent them off for consignment so he could still get the money out of them, but he didn't have to do all the work to fulfill those cards, to be scanning and listing and pricing and negotiating and shipping cards just to make 4 cents a piece. And that let him move all of his focus to those higher ROI actions and higher value cards where he could make more per card for the exact same amount of time. And this year alone, he's made over $110,000 of profit already through the first 7 months of the year. I want to be clear, this is not a promise, this is not a guarantee. Your results will vary based on how hard you work and market conditions and all that stuff. And he's also busted his butt to make that happen. So this isn't an accident. This has taken planning, strategy, and action. But this is an example just to demonstrate the power of focus when you put your attention on less of the wrong things and more of the right things. All right, next one. Are you actually executing enough? So it's really easy to get distracted in the card market today, guys. It's noisy out there. But the only thing that actually drives results is taking action. Knowing what to do versus actually doing it, those are 2 different things, okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a look at your card business, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself and answer the question, where is the bottleneck? And once you figure it out, I want you to fix it, okay? For example, is it that you don't know what to do? Great, go find a YouTube video, learn, and then do it. Is it that you're buying more than you're selling and you're low on cash? Well, list some of those cards or get them out the door for consignment. Keep things moving so you can keep your cash flowing. Is it that you're buying grading candidates, but they're over here sitting on your desk and you're putting off the part where you actually inspect and get them submitted to PSA? If that's the case, block some time and just do it. One of the sayings that I live by these days is get it off your desk. I don't want things sitting on my desk because that means that they're sitting there with my money tied up and they're not making me money if they're sitting on my desk. I have to get these cards out the door, whether it's to be graded, whether it's to be consigned. I just have to ship things and keep them moving. So if they're sitting on my desk, I am literally costing myself money for every day that they sit there. Get it off your desk and keep things moving. If your bottleneck is that you've got a bunch of random cards from breaks or past buys that you don't care about, sell it and free up the cash and then go reinvest that more strategically this time around. if it's that you're researching endlessly instead of taking action. Guys, I normally want you to watch as much YouTube as possible because I'm trying to build this channel, but you have my permission. Please, for your own good, turn off this video and go do something if this is you and you're the person that just watches videos all day and thinks about it but doesn't take any action. You have to take action or you're not going to get any results. Consuming card content can feel productive without actually producing anything. And I will say learning is valuable when it helps you improve future decisions or actions that you're going to take. But eventually, if learning doesn't turn into execution, then you're just kidding yourself. I heard a great phrase the other day, you're a wantrepreneur, not an entrepreneur. Be an entrepreneur, go out and take some action. So figure out that bottleneck, remove it, and just remember that results come from actions you take, not actions that you think about. All right, finally, do you know when you're supposed to sell? This one is hard. There's no perfect formula for when to sell. So here's what I like to do. I like to start by going back to my original thesis. Like, why was I investing in this card in the first place? And I like to look at what was the thing that made me want to buy this card. And whatever that thing was, ask yourself, has that happened yet? Did it work out? If so, great, you won. Sell the card and move on to the next card. And here's the key here, don't get greedy. There's always another card out there. You don't have to retire from the sale of every card. But a lot of times what ends up happening is that the card jumps to a price that we would have been so happy to get when we first bought that card, but we get emotional and we decide, oh, hold on, maybe I like this player more than I thought. I might hold and see if I can get a little bit more. And I think some really good perspective is just to consider like, wait, isn't this the price that you said would make you happy? It's there, you won. Don't let greed stop you from winning. There aren't many feelings that are worse than having a chance to win and then getting greedy and holding out for even more, and then something changes and you watch the margin disappear entirely. That's an awful feeling. Been there many times, learned this one the hard way, but when you're right, when you can take that win, take it, take the money, get to the next card. Now here's the trickier part, is when you look at that catalyst, whatever that thing was that you bought the card for in the first place, and that thing has happened, but it didn't work out. That's when things get a little bit tougher. For example, you send off a card that you thought had a chance to get a PSA 10. If it got a 10, you would have made a bunch of money, but it comes back a 9. What do you do then? Now, the question that I like to ask in this scenario is, at this point, given what I know now, would I still buy that card at the current value? And all too often the answer is no, definitely not. I wouldn't be investing in a PSA 9 of this card at this price. Why would I do that? I bought the card to get it graded because I thought a 10 would be worth way more. So what am I going to do with a 9? Exactly. Why are you holding it then, right? So you got to consider, okay, if my play has played out and it didn't work, even if it didn't work out, whatever that thing was, it's come and gone. It's generally now time to sell, because if you're holding still, you no longer have a plan, and that means you no longer have a timeline either. This one crushes people. It's super common because we don't get what we wanted and no one wants to take a loss or admit defeat, and so we just end up holding forever instead of cashing out and moving on to the next card. But here's the problem. When you hold, your money is tied up in a mediocre or even a bad card forever. And there's no light at the end of the tunnel anymore because you don't have a backup strategy for it. So it's kind of like choosing to stay on a sinking ship. Why would you do that? So whatever your plan was, once it plays out, it's usually time to move on and just get to the next card. Now, sometimes it makes sense to sell before the thesis plays out. So one example of this is if you happen to get an unexpectedly strong offer. I just had this happen yesterday. I bought a Mattis Buzelis card a couple of weeks ago for $242. It was a Prism Red Sparkle PSA 10, felt pretty good about it, tough grade, and I was very happy with that price to begin with. But my plan was actually initially to hold it until right before the basketball season, which is usually when you see values trend up on the way into the season. And I just figured, why not just list it with a high buy it now anyway? Can't hurt to just see if there are any offers out there. And guess what? 2 weeks after buying it, just yesterday, I sold it for the full buy it now price of $460. So I made a net profit of $194 after fees in just 2 weeks. Not bad, right? Another scenario where I'd be willing to sell before the thesis plays out is if I identify a better opportunity for that money. So I'm always asking myself, is this the card that will rise the highest and fastest? And I do this for cards that I'm considering buying. I also do this for cards that I already own. If so, if I really believe that, then great, my money is in the right place. But if not, why not sell and put the money into the card that I do believe is going to be the one that rises the highest and fastest instead? Now, the other tricky part of selling is that sometimes the original thesis changes. So maybe somebody gets injured and maybe performance isn't what we expected, or maybe the team situation changes. Someone gets traded unexpectedly. The market shifts and the conditions change. The timeline shifts. Whatever it is, if the original reason you bought the card no longer exists, or if there's new information entering the equation, we've got to use that information and reevaluate the whole play. Don't continue holding simply because you already own the card without a second thought. It's smart and even necessary to take new information and look at your own investments critically. And the toughest part here is that sometimes selling for a loss is the right thing to do, even though it doesn't feel good. All right, guys, the point here is that you don't need to make this more complicated than it is. If you want to make money with cards, you got to have a plan. You got to make sure you're giving yourself enough upside when you're right and actually execute. And then you just got to know when it's time to move on. You do those things consistently, and you're going to put yourself in a pretty darn good position to be successful. If this has been valuable and you like card strategy talk, I post these kinds of videos all the time, so don't forget to subscribe. But otherwise, I'll see you on the next video.